Hi everyone, we're gonna go ahead and get started. There's still a few more people coming in, but welcome back to the Cambridge Institute for Music Therapy Research lecture series. This is our first lecture of 2021, so we're very glad that you've all come back to see us again. I'm just gonna introduce you to some of the Zoom webinar features. So as you can tell, attendees can't share their video, but we would love it if you would introduce yourselves in the chat and let us know where you're coming from and maybe what profession you are, if you're a music therapist, or yeah, what you do and why you're here today. And we'd love to encourage you to ask questions throughout the webinar. So there is a Q&A function that you'll find at the bottom of your screen. And you can also vote for other people's questions throughout the webinar if there's something that you're particularly interested in finding out about. That would be great if you could vote for other people's questions also. And if you're using social media today, please use the hashtag #SimterWebinar so that we can find all of your feedback and information from today. And one more thing, at the end of the webinar, there will be a survey, and our researchers today have asked some additional questions about music listening in dementia care. So we'd love to hear your feedback on that as well. And that will pop up on your screen at the end of today's webinar. So I'll just hand over to Dr. Alex Street and Professor Jörg Fachner, who will be introducing our panelists for today. Thanks very much. Alex, you're on mute.
Sorry, there I was looking at a different screen and forgot to unmute. Thanks, Nina, and welcome to everybody. I hope that you're all well and stable and your internet connections are too. Welcome to Cambridge Institute for Music Therapy Research, where our priority areas are healthy aging and dementia, mental health, neuroscience of music therapy, children, young people and families. And we have a panel this evening to talk about music listening and arousal, who I will now introduce. So we have Professor Nigel Osborne, who is a composer and aid worker, Emeritus Professor of Music and Human Sciences at the University of Edinburgh, and Distinguished International Professor at Peking University. He's worked for many years in care homes using music to help enhance the lives of residents. He's also co-inventor of X System, which he will be taking us through this evening, and we'll be discussing as part of the roundtable. And this is a technology that can predict neurophysiological responses, mind and body, to music. And we have Eduardo Miranda, Professor in Computer Music at the University of Plymouth, where he is Director of Interdisciplinary Centre for Computer Music Research. His area of expertise includes music composition and music technology. He's a pioneer in the field of brain-computer music interfacing, or BCMI, and is championing the development of BCMI technology to enable people with severe motor impairments to engage in music making. I've seen a little bit of that a few years ago at the Royal Hospital for Neurodisability. And he's a principal investigator of the RadioMe project. And Alexis Kirke, Dr. Alexis Kirke, also is on the RadioMe project. He's a senior research fellow in computer music and a key founding member for RadioMe. His research interests include applications of music and the arts to technology and human-computer interaction, computational modeling of musical performance, and assistive technology for dementia. And Jörg Fachner is the co-director of the Cambridge Institute for Music Therapy Research and the Cambridge principal investigator for RadioMe. Jörg's been working in music therapy research for over 20 years and is keen to use brain research and music technology for analysing and evaluating the music therapy process and outcomes. He's involved in music therapy-driven social neuroscience research projects funded with EU and national grants in Germany, Austria, Finland, and the UK. So I will go straight ahead and introduce you to the first presentation from Alexis. Alexis, if you'd like to proceed.
Good evening. I will share a few PowerPoint slides with you tonight. Let's do this so that you can look at those as we talk. Okay, here we go. So RadioMe, the project, in a sense, it's one segment of RadioMe, but a key segment that relates to the topic of this discussion tonight. I'm going to cover in simple terms all of the segments of RadioMe very briefly to give an overview so you can see where it all fits together and how it all fits together. So the whole project is fairly large. We have the Plymouth ICCMR, which Eduardo runs, that I'm a member of, the medical school in Plymouth, and Glasgow Computing, who are world leaders in human-computer interaction, and of course, the Cambridge Centre for Music Therapy. We have some partners outside of academia as well, such as BBC Radio Devon, the NHS Trusts, MHA Homes, who are working closely with Cambridge Music Therapy. So we have Bauer Media as well, who run some of the largest commercial radio stations in the UK. Although the initial work will be done with BBC Radio Devon on non-commercial stations, we wanted to ensure that we didn't exclude commercial stations from the work we were doing. And of course, the Alzheimer's Society are a key part of this project for reasons that will become clear. Let's just start, because I think this is a key element. Why radio? Why are we using radio? What does that have to do with dementia? Well, one of the first things I learned, my kind of first interfacing with people living with dementia was BBC Radio Devon asked me to look into how to make radio broadcast and mechanics of radio broadcasting more dementia friendly, and how the radio could be more helpful to people living with dementia. And one of the first things I found was just how common it was for people in the statistically prevalent age range for symptoms of dementia to listen to regional radio. So there's another element as well, which is mainstream radio has both a musical part and the spoken voice part with DJs. You'll see why that's relevant in a minute. In other words, it provides a potential interface involving voice and music, and one that is very familiar to people living with dementia. Now, what is RadioMe? Well, RadioMe, it's not its own radio station, it takes a radio station, so it maps the natural voice and music elements of a radio station. Initially, we were working with BBC Radio Devon to investigate this, and it maps it onto an integrated aids for memory and agitation. So there's two elements, the memory element and the agitation. The agitation particularly relates to what we're going to be, to what's being discussed tonight. So how does it do this? Well, the core technology, one of the core, if you like, sonic technologies, it will remix the BBC station, the BBC local station, to become a support methodology for people living with dementia. And the key thing is to help them stay at home as long as possible, to help them to have some autonomy, to live in their homes. They don't have to be moved to somewhere they really, people want to stay in their homes. This is the thing, people want to stay in their homes. So it will combine existing broadcast media with in-home and wearable sensor-based technology, so that there is a wearable element to this. The person living with dementia will need to wear something to participate in the RadioMe experience and to use it. So what does that mean? What's actually going to be in the home of the person with dementia? Well, as I've just mentioned, a comfortable, worn wireless bio bracelet. What does that mean? It's something that can go around most commonly the wrist. They're getting better and better every year. They can detect biosignals such as heart rate variability, which can be indicative of stress states in a person living with dementia. And they can connect wirelessly in fairly almost real time, very fast, with a computer. So we also want to put a computer connected to internet radio into the home of the person with dementia. The computer will need speakers. I mean, this is radio. Finally, the computer will have software, some sort of diary system. As I said, we want to help the person with dementia kind of deal with their daily schedule, some form of music remixer, and a speech synthesizer. We want an artificial DJ here. So an example of what will RadioMe actually do, it is a very novel approach. So an example of what it will do, the audio output through the speakers in the home, it'll just sound like BBC Radio Devon, for example, in the first case, or BBC Radio Cambridgeshire, whatever. Then the person with dementia switches on the process, and at some point, for example, and near the start of a song, a DJ-like synthesized voice can seamlessly override that with, for example, a reminder to hydrate. There are various things we take for granted that a person with dementia may just forget to do: lock the front door, hydrate, take their medication. All of these elements can be placed into the announcements on the radio station. So that's one element, is integrating it with their diary. The other element is agitation. I mean, agitation is such a burden for people living with dementia. It's such a burden for the budget to look after people in this country, these agitation episodes. So if we can detect an agitation episode, I'm sure many of the attendees at this talk, you're aware that music, the right music at the right time, can have a profound effect on a person. So the idea would be that at a rate that is comfortable for that person, that new music can be mixed in from their own library and integrated with the flow of music from the radio, but music that's been shown to reduce the symptoms of agitation for that person. So that is, in essence, RadioMe. There's kind of two parts to it. For anybody that I'm not going to go any deeper into it because I have limited time, but for anybody that's interested, maybe later, there is a rather old-fashioned example we did a couple of years ago using a speech synthesizer of what it can sound like. But I might leave that for someone else to play later, just given the time constraints. And here we have the more technical elements of how the whole thing will fit together. It's a 50-month project. This is a big project. This is how the work is divided down between Plymouth, the Medical School, Glasgow, and the Centre for Music Therapy. So I hope that's given an overview of what is really a very large and complex project. And that's me.
Thank you, Alexis. Yes. So yes, that's an introduction to the RadioMe project. As Alexis said, please do enter any questions you have into the Q&A box at the bottom rather than the chat, and we will get through as many as we can before we finish at 7. I think it's 7. Next, we're going to hear about the X system, which is a music listening system from Professor Nigel Osborne. Nigel.
Thank you. I'm just going to try and share the screen. Should be able to see it now and try and get it on to play. There we go. Good. Is everybody seeing that? Good, excellent, thank you. So, first of all, just some general thoughts. I'm seeing the wonderful list of people attending this evening. Greetings. I see that I don't really have to dwell on this for too long. Everybody's very, very aware of the power of music in helping people in last phase of their life. I just want to pick out this little statement, rather nice, from 2018 from Alistair Burns and Sheila Morris, NHS, pointing out really how important music and memory are, what a powerful connector music is for memory for older people, and just how it can help reduce anxiety and depression, help maintain speech and language, enhance the quality of life, have a positive impact. Also on carers, it's not just the people and the residents that we're interested in. And actually that piece of research, that statement came hot on the heels of this piece of research, and so everybody knows, but one of the rare fMRI studies of brain connectivity and dementia. And the purpose of this study was to look for connections that might explain the mystery of how music can bring language back when people sing, and indeed in other circumstances, and actually ended up opening a Pandora's box, because it's far bigger than that. Here's a matrix, and what you see is the colors in blue are before the music experience, fMRI, and that coming through the middle to the red end of the spectrum being the music, after music. And you can see how populated the matrix is by red, how the blues really, really submerged in red, and where you can see the connections. These are connections here that are being identified between visual and sensory motor, visual and auditory, with visual and frontal parietal, with dorsal attention, with salience, in other words, how clear events are, right the way through to cerebellum activity to do with movement and smoothing of movement. A massive, even for us, a bit of a shock, how huge, how much there is in this Pandora's box. A few quick reflections from programs that people have used, like Playlists for Life. I think it's a very nicely put together program, based on memory recall, positive changes in moods and emotional states, a sense of control over life, non-pharmacological management of pain and discomfort, tremendously important, stimulation that promotes interest even when other approaches are ineffective, structure that promotes rhythmic and continuous movement or vocal fluency as an adjunct to physical rehabilitation, and opportunities to interact socially with others. All of those tremendously important. So I'd like to add one thing to that, which is helping people through the day, helping people get from one place to another during a day. So this is where we can look at X system, which tries to do this, and it's based on the principle of entrainment, which is that we change our state through music most effectively when we change it step by step, as the body does in most things. So, for example, if you're running the fastest you can possibly run, and you're feeling really tired, and there happens to be a bed by the road, you don't jump into it. That would be really rather uncomfortable thing to do. You slow down the run, you slow down to walk, you slow down the walk, you may eventually sit down, and you may eventually lie down after that. In other words, the body and mind require being led through procedures. And so with X system, we can lead people through procedures in the day. So here's one at night. It's helping people who might be a little bit kind of active in the evening to wind down, to be able to go to sleep. And here we are as a set of pieces, but an hour-long program from Doris Day. And it begins with the Deadwood stage. We'll pick it, and then it goes on the street where we're going to pick it up halfway through on the street where you live. Then we're going to join us at the end when we hope people are ready to sleep. Of course, the choice of repertoire is the preferred repertoire of the residents, either individually, or in this case, this is for a group space, collectively. We have ways of collecting that. And also, you're going to say, well, a good music therapist can do this, or reasonably good could do this, because all it means is finding repertoire that we sense will help people to relax step by step, of course. But the reason for automating it is that actually we don't have enough music therapists in the world to tackle every repertoire for every person, every situation where this might be useful. We have in regular use in the world, beyond the 40 million tracks in our own society, we have another 200-300 million that are knocking around. So we can't do that. So we invented X system, and what it does is it makes a model of the musical brain. It models the various things in the brain that affect our responses, and it's proved to be pretty good at predicting arousal, which we were using in that last set. How arousing something will be, or how relaxing it will be, and gives a number to that so that you can make an entrainment. Lower level, lower arousal, more relaxing, and also things like emotions it can predict. It can predict positivity and negativity, valence and emotion fairly accurately. So here's, for example, it produces color circles. Here's a color circle. The bottom of the circle is low arousal. The top of it is high arousal. And the left of it is negative valence, and the right of it is positive valence. And here's Nightingale if it's Fitzgerald, and you can see that it sits just over halfway up, so moderately arousing, and positive in emotion, but not hilariously, funny, joyfully, emotive, but actually in a kind of reflective space of positive emotion. And what we'll see now as I play the track is you'll see part of the analysis. The very bottom is predicting what the brainstem will do, what the lowest parts of the brain will do in terms of turbulent activity, in terms of sharpness. It's also going up. You go to the motor cortex, you go to the auditory cortex, facial gyrus, showing harmonicity and other things that affect and send signals from to the limbic system. And finally, there's a summation. You see at the top how that might affect general valence, positivity of emotion, how it might affect arousal. And in fact, we can be quite specific in pinpointing emotions on the circle. So here we go with Ella Fitzgerald, hear a bit of this. So here's a good night Christmas playlist where you can see little circles, where you can see the dot descending. That's similar to the Doris Day sequence, but for Christmas. Getting going with the Beatles. This is for morning, and where people may be a bit sluggish, and it covers an hour that might cover getting up, getting dressed and washed and ready for breakfast. And so we'll start with the first, Yesterday, which has an arousal of 0.35 and a valence of 4.9, so pretty positive valence, but a low arousal. And after that, we're going to go to the very end of the list, what happens an hour later, with back in the USSR, with a high arousal of 0.81, and also a slight lift in valence. It's a rocky number, but it's a cheerful number. So here we go. This is the beginning and the end of an hour of getting going with the Beatles. Alongside the positive feelings and arousal, quite a lot of stimulation from the motor cortex there and the beat and rhythm, which we measure what we call rhythmicity in the analysis. A little bit scary for me and my generation to see that the Beatles are now repertoire for care homes. My God, and that's scary. I'm in my mid-70s, and that comes to me as a bit of a shock. But there we are, my generation. And then going on, here's something that I remember too, being a child just after the war, Glenn Miller. Still people around in care homes who find Glenn Miller interesting repertoire. And here's an interesting, I'll finish with this set of pieces. It traces Lunchtime. It was for a care home in Haddenham, in Buckinghamshire, that wanted to help the problematic business of a general lunchtime dining area. How do you get people in, moving in? How do you get them relaxed to digest? How do you get them moving again at the end? Well, you do it with Glenn Miller, and with X-System we produces these analyses. And so we begin with the Woodpecker song. We go to the middle to a Nightingale sang in Berkeley Square. That's the lowest point, and then it comes up to American Patrol at the end. I won't go all the way through it, but just to give you a flavor, because I like to have just a few words at the end. So here we go with Glenn Miller, Lunchtime. End it there, but my mother's favorite song. But then we go on to American Patrol, which of course the last days on Capitol Hill has got a new meaning, but Glenn Miller could never have imagined. So just a few comments. We do with X-System, the way we produce this is by a mixture of using the system and curation. And we have a lot of playlists up on the Recovery College, NHS Recovery College Music for Wellbeing website. We do like to tailor it to needs of individual institutions, and that is a part manual, part curatorial, and part using the technology. But very important I mention in the context of this discussion is that we do have sensor apps, and we can use sensors to detect where people are and to trigger playlists that will take them from where they are to where they want to be, and the sensor will also follow them. So if, for example, in moving from Woodpecker Song to Little Brown Jog, top of we haven't actually relaxed somebody a bit, we'll try again with something else, and we'll keep going until we actually do succeed. And we've never failed in bringing people down in their level of arousal or the opposite. So we're very much geared up to this and geared up to emotions. We can detect things, joy, we can detect sadness, things of that kind. We can work with those things too. So it's this is, I hope, something to enhance the lives of music therapists, not to take things away, because the task it's attempting is something that the community could not achieve collectively, in the massiveness of need in the world. Anyway, lovely to be here. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks so much, Nigel, and thank you to Alexis. Fascinating areas. There's the RadioMe project, which is trying to extend independent living for people living with dementia for as long as possible and help to manage those neuropsychiatric symptoms with the highest possible quality of life. And then there's a system that maps music onto an arousal valence, and playlists can be compiled that will guide people to a certain arousal level, whether it's up, down, or maintaining it. So it's an amazing sort of combination, and a lot of information. And there are some questions coming in. There are 9 questions in the Q&A so far. But just one more thing that I'll mention now, which is within the RadioMe project, we now have funding for a nested study for a PhD, and that is looking at how, and that's working with Nigel and the X System team as well within RadioMe, to see whether these playlists using X System can help with sleep for carers, because this is an area that really does need some attention. I don't think there's anything that's been looked at really, certainly within the realms of music listening, and certainly sleep quality and quantity is affected in many people who are living at home and looking after somebody living with dementia. So we really look forward to getting, we'll probably get a lot of applicants for that, certainly hope so, and we look forward to looking through those. So we're going to open up a round table now, and we will get through all the questions, I think, as well. Hopefully we've got an hour now, but we probably will extend the response to questions beyond this evening if we can. Nina and I can look at them or something like that. So I suppose, Nigel, you mentioned Playlists for Life. And there are some great resources that people can find, some will be aware of, for helping with compiling playlists. But I suppose this is perhaps an interesting area to start off with is, well, and of course, as part of any research, RadioMe works with a fantastic group, an advisory group, patient care and public involvement group. And we've been spending a lot of time looking at, well, how do we, for RadioMe to work, we've got to have the right music. Otherwise, it's not going to have the effect that we want on agitation not escalating, that our heart rate monitors detect any changes in heart rate that are set for each person, each user. And we know that they might be going in that direction. So perhaps some discussion to begin with on, where we are really in terms of how to go about compiling the playlists.
Right, Alex, I chip in here. And yes, there's absolutely the question that we had when we listened to Alexis, who unfortunately had to leave, and then to the presentation of Nigel, is this kind of interactiveness and this question of how can we address agitation and arousal at the right time so that we then can play the right music. And I think what we have created with this idea of setting up RadioMe is really to find a way for this interactiveness. So we are looking for sensors that make it possible that we can really detect arousal, or let's say that agitation type of arousal, which is more or less negative. When you're getting uplifted, and what Nigel is showing us with these slopes that he's creating with the playlist, is something that when agitation kicks in, that is not experienced as a negative, as a positive thing. So, but this is what we want to detect so that we then can play the right music at the right time. And this is where the mapping from what Nigel has shown us with the X system is really based on the latest science of the brain research science, so that we can really entrain the music as it is done in the music therapy process, which has been shown for many music therapies, that you match that arousal level to then bring it down. And presentations, for instance, from Ming Su, you can hear and see that very well, or from Helen Oda Miller. And so I think this bit that we personalize, and that is what the music therapist does in the moment when doing music therapy, and that is maybe, so bringing that together, that we have a playlist that can entrain us to become calm, to be in lunch, or to get, get out or get up, but that when the music therapist is really addressing the arousal level of the patient that he or she is working with, that is this kind of interactiveness, this personalization. To get there, this is why the RadioMe, when sitting with Alexis to create this system, that we can really, we were always thinking, so what is the best sensor? And Nigel, you just touched on it very briefly, that it is of importance for us in the RadioMe, and I think Eduardo will say a lot about that also, is that we really find a sensor that is really giving us the right data, also at the right time, and that it is a validator, so that we're not interpreting arousal, which is a positive, emotional state, with agitation, so that suddenly then the music kicks in and overrides something that the person likes, or brings a music in, which is, my way for the 100th time, because it's the favorite song of that person. We don't want that to happen, so that we're really having this kind of broad personalization, and that we can really do that. And for that, we have our advisory board, we have our people that really advise us on that, personalization, time of day, chronobiology, all these kind of important things that we need to get to have that entrainment that you have in a playlist created on the spot. That's where we want to go to.
Could I chip in and say, with sensors, I mean, obviously I'm sure you've tested all sorts of things, and with X System, we've done the rounds really of what we could find. And obviously the most robust is heart rate, as you said. Skin conductance is useful as a kind of micro time trace of the autonomic nervous system, but it's also very jumpy and volatile as well. Its virtues turn into volatility, but a very, very interesting measure that can help with valence, can help to know, we know that somebody's highly aroused, but we don't know whether they're angry, ecstatically happy, or whatever. Well, heart rate variability is probably we found that, and we use that to test our valence categorizations, heart rate variability, in the sense that vagal power, in the sense that high variability indicates, this, but it's now there are sensors that can catch that, earlobe sensors and others that I think that's probably going to be our salvation in detecting those things. It's very, very crucially important that we don't misinterpret. Somebody goes sky high on our heart rate measure sensor, and actually, they're exactly where we want them to be. They're very, very happy, and so let's keep it there. So that I think HRV, heart rate variability, is probably the most available in the moment measure.
Yeah, thank you, Nigel, for your presentation. It was very interesting. I can see a direct correlation between the two projects. For everybody out there who is not aware, it's probably the first time that we explained our projects to each other in such a detail. So, and I can see here a very good embedding of the work that you have developed into the RadioMe framework that we are trying to put together. So there are a few things that always come to mind, and from experience as well, working with trying to understand what are the signatures, the biological signatures of emotional responses to music. Even though there are various researchers looking into this, and there are various papers and so on, the truth thing, it is very difficult to find something that fits for, one thing that fits for all, because we are all very different. We like different kinds of music. Something that Jörg may like or Alex may like, I may not like, and that a piece of music that may be calming for you may be irritating for me. So these are issues that we should also consider very carefully and be open to be flexible when we design these things. So the idea of having systems that are customizable, adaptable to specific individuals, that's a very important thing. And in relation to that, there was an idea that was floating in the air a little while back, in the sense that instead of perhaps playing music that already exists, playing the playlists of songs that are already part of our culture, perhaps if one day computers would be intelligent enough to compose bespoke piece on the fly, according to data that we gather from a specific situation, or even if we could modulate, let's say, take a Beatles song and make it faster or slower, or changing the lyrics, or make the change on the musical signal as the music is being produced or being played back, that would be most beneficial for this sort of things that we want to make. Of course, technology is not quite there yet for this, but it is advancing, and there will be a day in which you will be able to compose very realistic songs with AI systems that are being driven by signals of all sorts of signals in real time. And I think we should aim for that as well as making systems for playlists and so on. Now, another thing that I would like to add with respect to sensors is that it's true. I mean, having a sensor attached to your body or skin response or heart rate or so on, it may be very effective, but some people may be reluctant to wear sensors. And I think, I can see my grandmother, taking this and put on the floor. I don't want this, and I don't want to wear any of these things. So we should also consider this. There is no sensor that will fit all purposes. One option that is kind of emerging in our research group is perhaps instead of attaching sensors, perhaps we could have something in the environment that detects motion, or detects maybe facial expressions, or detect behavior that is based on movement, and other indicators that may be less intrusive and perhaps more effective. But again, there is this problem of will we tell the person that the person is being watched by cameras? Is it ethically plausible to do this, and where this information goes, who has access to this information? So these are things that we during the development of this project, we are asking ourselves, how far we can go into detecting this information, and what is the most effective way to detect the information. So I just wanted to throw some of those ideas in the mix, because we are developing technologies that will have an effect on people. So we want this to help people, to make lives better. But if we are not careful about the things that are peripheral to these technologies, now we may end up with technology that's not being useful at all, and may cause more harm than goodness.
Right. Right. Yes, there's a lot of elements coming up here about, you know, suitability of sensors, the kind of technology that we might be heading towards. I can't help feeling at the moment that we should ask somebody who is talking about AI generated music. Can we get people's voices heard, Nina, in this roundtable now?
Alex, I wonder if that, I mean, it should be possible that we can kind of make it happen. But I know, Eduardo, you were also referring to this idea that at the beginning, when we started thinking about RadioMe using generative music, that concept that is kind of using some of that playlist's core bits, that then they can vary so that we have a closeness to the participants or to that person's liking. But is generated in the moment. So, but then for the sake of writing the application, we were kind of thinking, okay, maybe that's too far going. But actually, yes, that was all based on that, on that generative music framework, utilizing AI to make that possible based on the preferences that we know from that participants. But yeah, Nina would need to open up to whoever that is. I think there's a name popping up, Thomas Middleton. He might want you to come in.
That's it.
Find him. Okay, I'm gonna allow to talk.
Mute. Hello, hello, hello.
Hi, Thomas.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. This is an absolutely wonderful and thoroughly inspiring session. Thank you so much, and very much appreciate everyone's time on this. I'm actually involved in the world of music for therapy and also creating content for platforms like Calm. So creating intentional, functional music to help people sleep and relax, looking at things like vagal tone, etc., heart rate variability. It's come to my attention, obviously, in this world of hyper-personalization. What can we do to actually tune in to exactly what a patient really needs? And we do have this technology right now. I flagged in the chat here that there is a project, OpenAI, called Jukebox, that's actually pretty sophisticated. Again, it's not quite there yet, but if you were to listen to it, it's utilizing the essence of sound, voices, and creating some very interesting, if you like, background sounds that are quite convincing at this point. And I think we're almost there in the sense that if you recognize the, let's say, the characteristics of a particular voice or the timbre of the music, you can create on the fly in real time this kind of content. And if one was listening to this music to soundtrack one's life, you're essentially having I suppose a passive experience, and maybe you wouldn't be fully tuned into vocals and lyrics, but maybe there are aspects of the rhythm, melody, and harmony that create an overall feeling. And if this AI can actually create a similar feeling, I think you're on the way to that hyper-personalized experience. I mean, I've been listening to it, and whilst it sort of sounds like a bit like a strange, dreamlike version of, you know, like so Frank Sinatra and Elvis, it's very convincing. And obviously with the world of deep fake vocal technology as well, we're not far off being able to mimic in a very convincing way. And I mean, AI music also very similar. Add to that the let's say the sound of vintage recordings, you can model that, put it all together, and if you have a patient that's obviously their peak moments were in their second decade, whatever second decade that is, if you listen and analyze the music from that decade, you're probably able to impart the flavor, the essence, if you like, of that particular era upon the parameters of the generative software. And Professor Nigel just wanted to say, Max says hello.
Thank you. Great. Best wishes to Max. Yes, that's really interesting. If I gotta just quickly come back, I mean, I think there's this has been fascinating from the beginning. I was there again, my generation was lucky enough to work a little bit with Jerry Hiller on very early computer compositions, and followed that with great interest, and right the way up to, for example, the Sony system at the moment, things that are capable of doing that. So yes, absolutely, and I think it's almost a kind of destiny for us to try and do that. I would only say this is not a conservative Luddite view, but at the same time, in our knowledge and responses to music, we are very specific. We are very, very clear and detailed, and therefore to evoke a memory of a moment, we would need the thing that is that moment. And if we get near it, we might provoke part of the memory, but to have the complete thing, we need the complete experience. So there's that to bear in mind too. In other words, bothering to try and create systems that put together existing music in meaningful ways is to try and serve that purpose, to try and serve the specific memory, the specific life that we are relating to. A quick comeback on one thing for Eduardo is that I do think that there are more universals in human experience than there are differences. So we worked something on the innate neurological response to music, and we found that by working within places like India, parts of the world, we were able to predict exactly people with excess and people's responses in terms of arousal waves as well as we can with European listeners. So there's also underneath this, there is a kind of hopeful consistency in human response that we can work with. Anyway, great stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, just to reiterate, I don't want to imply that we should not use existing music because existing music is good for memory.
Yes.
It brings back memories from when you experienced, when you listened to that music in the past and so on. What I am advocating is a mix, one thing complementing the other. I think that's.
And as usual, we totally agree. That's exactly what I would like to see.
Yeah.
I'm just going to draw some attention. Lorien Hockfort, I'm sorry for the pronunciation, it's probably completely wrong, but asked a question which Nigel has responded to, which is about the playlist that we had examples of were all of Doris Day, and there are many more choices around that. And actually, I encourage you to visit Recovery College. If you just type into your browser Recovery College X System, you'll find a whole load of playlists there that have been assembled using X System and that have mapped onto the valence. Nigel, did you want to say anything about that?
Yes, I mean that's Recovery College Music for Wellbeing and yes, there's a whole lot of this. There's also one for care homes, but also for dealing with other situations, and we've had good responses to that. We had a big piece of research which showed very, very encouraging responses during the pandemic to people having been helped by entrainment playlists, helped to get from one place where they don't want to be to somewhere where they want to be in music. So that has worked. So it's Recovery College Music for Wellbeing.
Steve Acklam.
I just want to thank Thomas for his contribution.
Absolutely.
The OpenAI, I made a note of it, and I will certainly have a look at the site, and we will get in touch certainly to discuss this further.
They've got some great projects on there, haven't they? Images to music and various other things.
Yeah, I love this stuff. Absolutely want to work with those guys if I have the chance. So that's one of them happens to. I happen to be the godfather of one of them, so I very much hope that I'll get the opportunity to work with them at some point.
We don't want to know about your mafia connections now, Nigel. It's not the time. I'm kidding, obviously. Yes. Yes, sir. Steve Acklam obviously said if you invert the playlist for the Beatles, then you can be working towards reducing arousal. To which Nigel responded, "Yes, Steve is part of the advisory group actually, and we've spent some time discussing how we go about assembling the right music for each person, and going through that process." Which we could talk about if anyone wanted to comment on. So there are other questions that have been responded to in the chat. For Nigel, there was a question from Jodie Blosker, who's one of our PhD researchers working on the Home Side project, which is another dementia project at SIMTA. Do the emotional ratings of the X system also take into account the lyrics of a song? To which Nigel responded, not directly. It is simply the music. Do you want to just say a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a really important question. Yes, because we had at one stage thought, do we go into word recognition? Do we, that's fairly straightforward, reasonably straightforward, a bit complicated with the singing voice, but we could do it. And then we discovered that actually that was probably distorting rather than helping, that actually in most music, the effect that's going to have on people is an embodiment of the words and the music together, and often the music carries that anyway, sufficiently for us to be able to predict it. If that makes sense, that there's a lot of messages in the music that we don't necessarily always need the words. And of course there are, we run across one or two paradoxes, like for example, we have some pieces that like Johnny Cash Hurt, for example, which our system says is a cheerful piece. And then everybody says, no, it's not, it's a really miserable piece. But then actually, if you measure people's responses, their heart rate variability increases when they listen to Hurt. Because although the words claim to be about negative things, actually, in the end, it's a triumphing over opposition of a problem song. So what I'm trying to say is we've tried to be pure and take it from the music, but we've found that we're not very often caught out. It tends to work pretty well, taking the music.
Thomas Middleton has come up again, but which is great. It's been very helpful. We'll get through as many as we can, but this is an interesting question. And of course, it's at the heart of finding the right music for each person. Surely you could base a playlist on a personality, cultural, and musical history profile. Peak moments in life are soundtracked by music or soundscapes. And as I was saying earlier, right at the beginning, this is really crucial. If we don't get the right music, then we're not going to get the right responses. And we also need to identify any music that's going to have an adverse effect as well. So if it's, it could be a genre of music. I mean, one person was talking, personal to them about country and Western music, that they would absolutely not want that on the playlist. So Nigel or Eduardo or Jörg, any comments about that, about actually this process? And, of course, lots of music therapists do this, and speech therapists do it as part of multidisciplinary teams as well. They get all this information to get everything together that's going to give the person the best possible chance of a good recovery or highest possible quality of life. What are your thoughts there?
Yes, Alex, absolutely. I mean, when working with a dementia patient, of course, you want to know what his, let's say, musical biography is, and so that you can use the songs, that have a particular meaning, because we know about the memory imprint that is related to whatever times when you were really on the blossoming, and how it is related to your time when you're becoming an adult. That's a very strong time with very strong emotional impulses. I just wanted to add that we also have the other side, that there's maybe a memory of a music which is related to adverse situations. So as a music therapist, you would, of course, you can respond in the moment when doing the music therapy that you're not matching. When you have a particular song which is related to a car accident, or a particular song which is related to whatever drug taking and has strong emotion and then reminds on that. So we know all these other adverse sides, and there's also a discussion on how that there is music that reminds us on negative emotions and negative life events. So that needs to be screened properly, and that's what of course in the process of doing the music therapy, and it, Alex, I'm not talking to you here, that that this is then chosen. And I think with RadioMe and with all the mappings that we do from the brain research onto particular acoustic, or let's say dynamics of the music, we have the chance in the therapy situation to respond immediately. And the system, like the RadioMe, which is responding based on the unvalid biomarker signals, whether it is the HRV, is then kind of giving us that that possibility to steer the radio playing properly, and that is so. Yeah, selecting the playlist means you need to know exactly the biography. You need to know the good of that song, so the memories, which is including, that's what we're doing in RadioMe, really a strong investigation into the patient's experience with the music.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's possible to, there's a memory bump that's been identified in all of the research around dementia and music listening, where it's most likely that you'll find the music that is going to trigger memories and be orientating for people. On the bio, there's a question. Oh, it's pinged up the screen. Sorry, hang on a minute.
Yes, Alex, if you find it, there is a question from Clemens Maitov I'd like to address. I think that's
sure, yeah.
So if the underlying model estimates levels of arousal and balance over time as a time series, how do you derive at a level for the whole piece? Just by averaging, or do you take fluctuation into account in a different way? I think that's to you, Nigel, and maybe also Eduardo wants to respond to that.
Yes, I mean, very, very quickly, yes, we take the whole piece. But there's this has to be done with care. Because, for example, there are certain pieces that will take you on a journey from one to a different place. And so you have to register that as well. And we do that by profiling in the system. But in general terms, yes, it's the average. And for most songs, that's the case. For most songs that people like and listen to, all the ones I've played tonight, hit a level that is for the song. You hit it early in the song and you remain there until the end. And so, yes, it's a generalization of the level, but it's an incredibly important question because you have to look dynamically at when things do change significantly. That has to be taken into account. It's no good my having a going to sleep list where halfway through the thing that starts really, really quietly and then suddenly becomes grotesquely loud and energetic is not going to be, we have to sense those things and filter them. On the question of sensors, there is a dynamic way in which we follow, as I mentioned to Eduardo, we follow. It's possible to have a sensor that follows the progress of somebody listening. And it's one of the ways that we can find the things that have caused distress, for example, and mark them and not repeat them in any other streaming. So it is a dynamic process, and we start from what we imagine, we learn is the resting heart rate of the person concerned, and then we take our measurements of arousal, and from that point it doesn't take long to get that measure, and actually if you have a repeat user you learn it, but even on a one-off you can get that by being quiet for a moment and then you've got it. So it is a dynamic process of relating to an evolving situation in the user's body in terms of both heart rate and the variability associated with it.
Thanks, Nigel. Just going back to the playlists that you took us through, Nigel, and bringing that into the world of RadioMe, where we're looking at whether or not the preferred music being automatically streamed in based on the heart rate data can actually stop the onset of agitation. The playlists that you presented, Nigel, were an hour long, and I've seen other ones. There are 20-minute ones as well. But I wondered if the panel could sort of talk about how quickly, and I apologize if someone's written a question already about this, but it's just while we're on this subject, how might that pan out with RadioMe? As in, it can't take an hour for somebody in their home who has the onset of agitation.
Can I come in quickly on that?
Yes,
sorry, sorry, I'm talking too much. Just to say that we've done a lot of work on it, and it's a simple rule. The 20 minutes is a good time for an entrainment, and if you try and the more you shorten that, the less effective you're going to be. In other words, if you have a 20-minute 5-song entrainment, if you cut that down to 3, it will still probably work, but not as effectively. Simple as that. So there's a trade-off.
It's a trade-off. Yeah. I think in the future, what we have to do is to have some sort of machine learning in the background that is watching when the such episodes happen.
Yep.
And then learn from experience, so to speak, because I guess that again, depending on the stage of the dementia, the problem the person is, and will also depend on previous intervention, so to speak. If it worked, then if that may have some sort of Pavlov effect that may work again next time it's used, or may not. So I think of course, in a normal situation, there would be a human observer that is going to, was going to adapt and so on. But in our case, as we are trying to automate this, we should consider designing an artificial intelligence system that would then learn as these episodes happen.
I'm going to go to some, so I can see Nigel and Eduardo and Jörg possibly are going through some of these questions as well.
Well, I would address one question, actually. Maybe Eduardo, you want to respond to that. Specific frequencies of the song, is it the song in general, or specific frequencies of the song that affect our body and mind? Or maybe Nigel, you think that's an interesting question, because very often there's this wish that there is particular gateways how we can manipulate, let me just phrase it like that, when we have access to particular frequencies, which in tinnitus, of course, makes a lot of sense to mask frequencies, but how to adjust emotions in a way, I just wonder if you want to respond to that, or if one of you wants to respond.
I'm not totally aware of using sound per se, of particular sound qualities for the purposes that we are looking here. But certainly, I think timbral qualities of pieces of music can have an effect. And we know that timbre is an important music characteristic. But as far as I am concerned, I have not looked into this yet, but surely there may be a relationship there. But I would not say specific frequencies per se, but combinations that would then have timbral, patterns that would affect. And of course, we need to consider the loss of hearing as well, and whether there are ways in which signals may be compressed to be delivered in ways that would be more suitable for people with hearing problems.
Well, that brings to mind, I think, Nigel, you mentioned different types of sensors that are available, which we have been looking at, like in-ear sensors. Whether or not that's something that could become part of a system like RadioMe, bearing in mind that some people are wearing bilateral hearing aids. Any thoughts on?
If we're just going quickly, I think it's really important is the question of hearing. And it needs a lot of work at every level in care homes. For example, I know you're working particularly for people at home with RadioMe, but we really need to do work on the way that sound is used in such environments. Blasting the television out at full volume, for example, is brutalizing for everybody in the space. And when we do have technologies where we have parametric speakers, pillow speakers, armchair speakers, all kinds of ways of getting close to people, and not necessarily using earphones. So that's very, very important, hearing loss. But another point, just to come back on frequencies and their effects, I mean, there's a whole spectrum. I know there are people much more qualified to speak about this here than me, but for example, ranging from brainstem responses, because our ancestors were afraid of snakes, sounds and very high frequency sounds have an anxiety provoking already detected in the brainstem coming up from the inferior colliculus to limbic systems. We have that very primitive responses to certain frequency areas, as Eduardo says, generalized. This is not specific frequencies. Then coming right the way through to in the auditory cortex, very important is harmonicity. How close the sound is to the harmonic series, how close it is to exponential distributions of energy in spherically resonating objects seems to be tremendously important to human beings. And what we know from the neuroscience and neurophysiology is that from the auditory cortex, there are direct signaling lines to the amygdala, where highly harmonic music will produce relaxing, reassuring impulses, and vice versa for non-harmonic stuff. So these are, as Eduardo says, absolutely very, very important. And specific frequencies for things like tinnitus, absolutely, where we have dropouts for certain people. The possibility of certain resonances in the universe that are more important than others, but I don't claim to know that. But what we do know is exactly what Eduardo says, is that this is tremendously important frequencies, spectra in our responses to sound and music, absolutely key, just as important as rhythm and everything else.
In just a study published, I think, from Durham researchers about roughness and in the music as a particular, universal in a way, not really, but mainly they were saying that when it comes to representing emotions, we're lost, because there's that history and there's always a particular individual response to music, which is also situational. And in our chats, we have Helen Odermiller, she was responding to a question from Claire Flower. I'm interested in the frequently repeated use of various presenters of the phrase "the right music," and so I think this the sound quality of the presentation is one thing, that it has this, but let's say the particular aspects of the sound representing emotions, that might be that is actually based on the individual experience, how you kind of perceive that. And I mean, we have this ideas that when you're masking particular parts of the sound, that you can even work therapeutically. I mean, there's one tradition, I don't want to go into that, but so yeah, I think from the stance of the music therapy, they would agree that whether you use roughness or dissonance, it will, and you use that in a rhythmical sense, it can be uplifting. It does not represent horror like in The Shining, where you have semitone patterns, and where it is representing horror. It is meant, so it's situated in that film, in that movie, to represent that. And film music is, by the way, very interesting on that, especially while they are looking at frequencies distributed in the acoustic space. Yes. So, but yeah, it brings us all back to this personalization question. How can we?
Yes, and that's what's meant by the right music. It's music that
exactly.
has the right associations for people, and then of course it needs to have the right effect in terms of heart rate, which is what we're using for RadioMe. On the subject of music and relevant to this as well, Hannah McCarthy, I agree that customizable aspects of these technologies are important, and wondered, A, how do you incorporate music from cultures around the world? Very important. And B, is there scope to include spoken word from family or friends, similar to the DJ aspect of RadioMe? This is something that we've had some discussion, Eduardo, about, isn't it? So who wants to go first with this two-part question?
I can just add the yes, I think it's in principle in the RadioMe project, we will try to to use voices that are similar to the DJ that on the radio at a particular moment, because we want to make it as seamless as possible, so as natural as if it was the radio station doing it. But having reminders and maybe poetry, readings, that come through by people who have a familiar voice, that we know that particular person may have a good effect in the listener. So we will bring this into the mix as well. So
and again,
that's an important important component.
Yeah, and again,
perhaps even singing, and an invitation to sing together at the specific moments, because we should not forget that music is not only a passive thing. It's important perhaps to offer an opportunity for engaging with what's being played through. So why not promote or stimulate participatory singing, sing along a tune and so on.
Yes, if I could drop, also going back to the point about different cultures, very, very important. I mean, in working, as we do with the innate neurological response to music, suggests that there is a universal in the human brain that all human musics relate to. They have their cultural features, surface features, but basically are dialoguing with the mind and body in the same way. That's how we were able to predict, for example, working in India, working with Sanskrit chant and in Tamil Nadu, and finding that we were predicting that actually a bit more accurately than we predicted Western pop music. And maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe the Indian music was a little bit less frilly, was a little bit closer to, the human oil wells of musical response than maybe our pop is. So I think there's a redeeming answer to that. I think there's a quite beautiful answer to that, which is we're much more similar than we think, and we are musically identical, which is why, if we wish, we can enjoy the music of somebody else's culture. Sometimes we have to learn the surface features a little bit. That might take, and if you want to play it well, it will take you 7 years to learn how to play the music of somebody else's culture well, but to hear it and start to enjoy it, a few minutes. And so I think it's a very redeeming part of it, and we mustn't forget that. It's tremendously important in our work.
Yeah, well, I mean, so RadioMe is a design and testing project. That's what the project is. There are different stages to it, leading towards a sort of proof of concept RadioMe setup that we can install for 3 months in different participants' homes and look at the data and see how the system is running in terms of the music being triggered when the heart rate data is indicating agitation onset, and whether the diary reminders are working as well. And that's heading towards, so Eduardo's mentioned something about the flexibility. How flexible can it be in terms of what can be offered to people? What's it going to look like? How do you turn it on and off? Where is it in the home? And also within the context of the RadioMe at this stage is that it's for people who can still live independently to a degree at home. They're in their home and they can still, dress, do certain things around the house, and hydrate, as Alexis mentioned earlier, and prepare food and things like that. Any further thoughts on from the panel on that sort of idea of someone being able to buy a RadioMe system that might be linked as well with the X system music? What might it look like?
Well, that's
Eduardo, what might it look like?
Well, of course, I mean, this is to be developed, when we try to find the right sensor, and some have, don't let you get the data that you need to have to stream it properly and to analyze it then properly. So that's the developmental work that we are on. And I think, of course, Eduardo can respond to that. But yes, to come to a radio program so that you can do your daily work on whatever you do in your home, and then, but being monitored in a positive sense, reliably monitored, that's definitely where we want to add to. or that's where we want to go to, and yeah, how that sounds like. I mean, that is then the question, how it can be produced. But I think at the end, I think Eduardo, you might say, have a comment on that. It should be as cheap as possible, but as good as sounding as possible, and yeah, and have that access that it needs to produce reliable data, streaming, upload and download, so that we can really, yeah, have a virtual music therapist.
There is no doubt that we need something with good quality and so on and so on. I think the pressing question that is, what shape, what form it will be, will look like. Is it going to be a box? Is it going to be a laptop? Is it, we don't want to end up with something that used for 2 or 3 days and then and then gets forgotten, as most pieces of technology that are that come up and end up being today. We don't know. We have to try these things. But one reason that radio is a good idea is because you turn it on and off, as and when. So perhaps that is a good model. It is not something that needs to be on all the time, but maybe on specific times when you want to switch it on, and when it is on, it's doing the job it needs to do. And or a carer switch on, or you switch on, but then there is the issue: will you remember to switch it on? That's another thing. But and another point is that we should not forget that what we are trying to do at this stage is for early stages of dementia, as Alex said. It is for people who are starting to have the symptoms, getting a little bit worried that things may be forgotten, agitation episodes coming, it can be stressful, you are afraid of staying on your own, and then perhaps there is a tool that may help to alleviate the problem, and also to put the carers at peace, and the family and so on, and delay as much as possible the need for more institutionalized intervention. I think that is what we are looking at this stage. So I think to wrap up, we are not trying to solve the world, solve the problem, and with a final solution. It's an initial approach. We are exploring possibilities, and there are some models. There are already some good technologies out there, some things that I did not know before I learned today. So I think it's our job to put these things together and start experimenting. And most importantly is to deploy this in the real world, because it's only by putting things out there in the real situation that that we want to address that we'll learn and be able to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We look forward to recruiting people. Obviously, the global pandemic has had an effect. Some people have asked some questions alluding to that as well. But there are some other questions coming up. I mean, it's clear to a lot of people that what music can do. But some of the questions that we're going to ask in the survey at the end are I suppose, specifically to people who've had experience of looking after people with dementia. But it's about accessing the music at the right time. If I wanted to put my own playlist together to help me wake up in the morning or get to sleep at night, it would take me forever, and I wouldn't be able to use a streaming service that would do it, I don't think, either, because they're just not that specific. So addressing that so that people can find the right music, in the case of RadioMe, that is going to have a calming effect where agitation is starting. So the right music at the right time is really crucial. But I mean, I've also found working with other patient populations like people with stroke as well, where music listening has been found to have a really positive effect on recovery, cognitive recovery, and recovery of language and mood, where playlists are compiled for them, so they're very personalized. It's tricky for them to access that music, you know, what do they do? What's the procedure? And as we said at the beginning, there are some procedures from Playlists for Life that Nigel mentioned, but again, is it enough? Can we do more to make the music available? Nigel, you were going to comment there.
Quite a few things. I mean, on the last point, yes, I mean, we've got a job to do, which is to convince the music industry to give us, you know, a licensing agreement that hospitals and health services can afford. The schools have it, but they haven't done it for health. And for example, with X System, we're able to work on the Recovery College now because we were granted a temporary license by PRS and others for medical research. That's how we're able to stream the repertoire at the moment, but we're not going to be able to do that forever. We're going to be at our ceiling soon. So there's almost a political job to be done in the music industry to wake up, and if they would not be so greedy and just be a little bit more human. And it isn't the composers and musicians who are to blame. It's the publishing executives. I can name them. These people have got to understand that if they open this up, they'll make more money but they'll make it in a good way because there's a huge need for music in what we do. And if they just loosen up, they can make a lot of money out of it in a very, very honest and moral way. So that's a really big thing. I just want to say, also going back to the earlier point, I think this is a wonderful initiative. It's so refreshing to find something that is bolted into real life need in a very vulnerable and important area that is actually visionary. And I really look forward, for example, I mean, it would be wonderful to have a hybrid of streaming of existing tracks and invented, you know, and AI tracks. I'll give a quick example that might be, if I've got time, from a little slightly different domain, but it illustrates the point very clearly. I'm working at the moment on a program on epilepsy. We're trying to prevent nocturnal seizures in epileptic children by measuring their normal behavior of EEG, brainwave electrical activity, then finding the time frequency structures that can entrain that. I'm using X System to search for those things at the moment, and then playing that music quietly. There's some evidence, and we hope that we can follow it through. It will limit epileptic seizures. It will stop the spikes happening. The normal brain patterning will be reinforced by the music. But how wonderful! I mean, already we're thinking, yes, we'll search the repertoire, but how wonderful it would also be to, you know, generate new stuff from, you know, the EEG data, as Eduardo has been working on. And of course, going back to what Middleton was saying, very inspiringly, you know, that can be, you know, close to the repertoires that the children respond to. I mean, in fact, in the middle of the night, children are not going to want to respond to acute memories like people in dementia are. You know, the fact that it's familiar and comfortable will be enough. So there's a huge journey to be made there. And finally, from our point of view, what would be wonderful, the sorts of things Eduardo was talking about, we do need more powerful AI. I mean, what we've got going at the moment with sensors works, but my goodness me, it could be improved with more powerful AI. And that would be great use of AI to be storing this information, you know, diagnostically, prescriptively, and recognizing things and remembering things, and affecting the streaming, you know, constantly feeding that into the streaming procedure. That would be magic.
Indeed. We've come to the end. It's 7 o'clock. I can see people are dropping off, not into sleep, but going off to do other things. And thank you so much to the panel and to Nina for organising this, and to all the people that have attended and asked really, really pertinent, interesting questions. Do complete the survey, which is online. Nina, did you have any, or did anyone else have any other closing comments? No, all good. Nina, are we good to, are we all hanging up?
Yeah, just about our next webinar, which will be on the 8th of February. So we have drama therapist Louise Combs joining us, and she'll be talking about early intervention in psychosis services. So do join us for that. There will be a link in your follow-up email to sign up. So we hope to see you then. And thank you to our panelists and everyone.
Okay, and you can always look on the SIMTA website, what's on, and you can find other information about X-System and RadioMe, also on the University of Plymouth website. Yeah, we look forward to updating people on the progress and working together. It's going to be great. Okay.